Three-day inaugural Africa Climate Summit comes to an end today with calls for the international community to do more for Africa's climate action agenda.
Extraordinary Summit of East Africa's heads of state extends mandate of regional force in the DRC by another 3 months to December 8, 2023.
And across the continent, Spain's football president, who kissed female player on the lips in celebration of World Cup win, is finally fired.
Funny how a simple kiss can make you lose your job. Be careful who you kiss. Well, good morning. This is the Morning Cafe. How hot is a coffee where you are? Ours is quite hot here, even as we continue with discussions around the climate change and climate action in Africa, with the Africa Climate Summit coming to an end today. We'll be talking more about that. My name is Freddie Ndimuli.
And I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyarungita. Most definitely we'll continue with this particular talks just to get to know how it even affects the business around you, and largely the fact that we did have the whole of Africa in Nairobi, Kenya. How much of a big deal was that, even for matters business? We'll be discussing all of that later. But then to a big story now.
Yes, sir. The 3-day African Climate Summit comes to an end today at the KICC. The event has seen at least 15 heads of states and governments attend. This week's meeting is expected to come up with a Nairobi Declaration, a document that will highlight Africa's united voice in the global climate arena and which could dominate the African agenda in New York during the 78th session of the United Nations Assembly this month, and later in Dubai during the annual United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP28. And so today, after the 3 days of the Africa Climate Summit, are you now better aware of matters on climate action? Are you now better aware about matters on climate action? You can share your views at X, at TV47 News on X, formerly Twitter, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Yes, and before we take a look at the dailies, let's get the day's diary with Stanley.
Most definitely, and actually I'm reminded of a Zulu proverb that says a tree is bent while it is still wet. Mm-hmm. A tree is bent while it is still wet.
Okay.
Think about it this morning.
Okay. Bending trees.
In today's diary this morning, ladies and gentlemen, still on Matters Africa Climate Summit. Today is the third day and today is the final day, but Matters conversation on climate doesn't end today. It continues the whole of this particular week. But then today marks the final day of the Africa Climate Summit in KICC, an event that has brought together more than 20,000 delegates and quite over, actually, was it about 19 presidents? Yesterday.
I saw at least 15 on that photo with Ruto.
Oh yes, but then confirmation from State House numbers had mentioned that about 19 presidents are in this particular summit. Away from that, actually still on matters, the summit, now on the sidelines of it, today we're expecting to have the African Parliamentarians Dialogue. So the National Assembly Speaker, Moses Wetangula, and his Senate counterpart, Amason Kingi, will preside over the dialogue today that brings together Pan-African parliamentarians. We'll obviously expect to see how this will be going and the kind of policies that they will be shaping up in relation to matters climate change, obviously. And today we will be privileged to have, a legislator just to tell us how all that matters policies is shaped up in the parliament when it comes to climate change. Well, every matters climate change and all that to something interesting here. Today we'll be expecting to see the commemoration of Cardinal Otunga. So today marks the 20th anniversary since the passing of Maurice Michael Cardinal Otunga. The commemoration of the anniversary is expected to take place at the Queen of Apostles Parish in Ruaraka. Well, from the church in Ruaraka to some matters KDF recruitment, and today you will be expecting to see this particular recruitment process for KDF cadets that began last month in counties including Bomet, Bungoma, Kilifi, Kisii, Kisumu, Nakuru, well, among others. And not to matters food, the Kenya Food Expo enters its second day today in Sarit Expo. It started yesterday and concludes tomorrow. So this event has brought together over 15 countries, and the stakeholders who are attending this particular expo are being offered a platform to seek suppliers, producers, and also service providers. And actually, before we cross over to Today in History, in the National Assembly today, you will be expecting to see the Committee of Inquiry on WorldCoin controversy. They'll be meeting the WorldCoin company rather, and its subsidiaries. And now today in history. So back in 2019, former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe died aged 95, a day like today. Mugabe, who ruled the country for close to 4 decades, was ousted in a military takeover in 2017. Rest in peace, Robert Mugabe. That is all for today in history and the diary. But then remember, when it comes to around 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., we'll be updating you on this particular diary in different counties and obviously crossing over to KICC to get live pictures. Remember, we'll be giving you a wall-to-wall coverage over the same, the final day of the Africa Climate Summit, the happenings, the pomp and color in this. And Fred, actually, speaking of matters, pomp and color, the dailies this morning, quite interesting here.
Quite colorful, if we might add. Eh?
Oh, yes.
I think, let me start off with the Standard today. Africa's a loud voice. Powerful message. Nearly 20 African presidents converged in Nairobi to talk climate change, and they did not disappoint. They are confident of continent's renewable energy potential and want the globe's mega emitters to honor their financial pledges. Today, they adopt a declaration deemed to be a game changer. As always, this has been given quite some coverage in the Standard today. Pages 2, 3, 4, 6 and 7, 5 pages there. And on the front page, yes? And it's
impressive to see. I mean, if they're saying nearly 20, that's about half of the continent's president.
Almost half.
Almost half.
Almost half.
And this is the inaugural. So we expect to see, now for next year, the Africa Climate Summit, wherever it is going to be, how many presidents are actually going to be attending that one?
Yes. Of course, there'll be some discussions later on at UNGA, that's the United Nations General Assembly, later this month. And then there's another climate forum in Dubai, which is going to be big as well. So yes, definitely this conversation will continue. This is the very first time Africa is having this conversation as a continent. And what the Standard has done, it has given quotes attributed to various heads of states who've been attending the event, and some of the delegates, senior delegates like John Kerry, the US climate envoy, a number of presidents there, Samia Suluhu, Julius Bio, Paul Kagame, even Akufo-Addo from Ghana, and what they said at the summit. At the bottom strip, Matters financing. Remember, this conversation is largely around financing.
Yes.
Compensation for Africa, matters to do with how much they should pay for carbon credits, and the kind of figures there that have already been given to Africa. Quite some impressive figures, starting with $25 billion, African Development Bank pledging towards climate financing by 2025. This is huge. 25 billion US dollars. Oh, yes. A lot of other figures there as well. So what the Standard has done is basically that on the front page is purely about the climate summit, but they've reserved the top strip for a few highlights about other stories on the inside pages, and that's about freedom fighter Muthoni Kirima taking a final bow. That's on page 10 and 11. In Matters Business, Kenya Miles petrol diesel vehicles ban. Interesting. That's on page 17, with discussions around this whole climate action in Africa, banning vehicles that use fossil fuels. Could be interesting. Oh, so yes. Kenya is thinking about it. In sports, AFCON, who has chance to qualify? That story is on page 32, which is the back page of the Standard, and they give you AFCON 2023 qualifiers, who still has a chance to qualify for the finals. And a good read there. And that's the front page of the Standard today.
Oh, yes. I was hoping to see Kenya's name there, but I believe this is BBC Sport Africa.
We have review. Every other country apart from Kenya, including Uganda.
And actually, Eswatini. I'm seeing Eswatini there. Wow, okay. Well,
one day, a day will come.
Right, and actually speaking of a day will come, these are the kind of talks that were happening yesterday. Most of these leaders and keynote speakers talking about a day where, climate action is actually achieved. On the front page of the Daily Nation, still on, give you a whole photo there of the leaders and actually presidents. Interesting, most of them clenching their hands, listening to the whole speeches there. There is a quote, Daily Nation gives only a quote by the president. How do we get Africa to pay 5 times more, and in brackets, than the rest? We are not asking to be favored or treated differently. We just need a conversation. Ruto, don't kill us with debt. So addressing a global gathering of dignitaries in Nairobi, President William Ruto decries unfair, quote-unquote, loan agreements with the West, saying this continues to disadvantage and impoverish the continent. And as former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry lauds Ruto's leadership, he blows hot and cold on climate reparations. To Africa, Daily Nation spares page 2 all the way to page 7 for Matters Climate Summit. But still on, even as we talk about talking, on the top strip of Daily Nation, Raila team wants political parties to pick IEBC chiefs. Azimio chief and his camp are rooting for an inter-party parliamentary group set up to spearhead radical electoral reforms reminiscent of a similar arrangement in 1997. On the right side of Daily Nation, win for acting officials as MPs reject proposal to deny them allowances. So lawmakers describe such a law as unfair labor practice, saying the proposal will violate the Constitution and the Employment Act. But it's that is on the back page. So it is Matters. Bill sought to deny staff who have been holding office in acting capacity for over 6 months an acting allowance. And at a glance there, Daily Nation gives you the maximum number of months that lawmakers recommend that the officer, or rather an officer, can serve in acting capacity before the position is declared vacant and filled is about 12 months. Well, in Kenya, you can hear someone is an acting servant for a number of years. Not to mention names, but that's the Kenya we live in. Still on now, front page of the Daily Nation, the right strip of it, not so sweet story here. Trader hit with 81 million Kenyan shillings. Okay, now the not so sweet story is lawyers make U-turn rescinds decision to withdraw Mumia's case. Lawyer had filed a notice to withdraw a liquidation petition against the sugar company, but has changed her mind and is now seeking the court's permission to rescind the withdrawal. More on that is on page 10. And still on page 10, trader hit with 81 million shillings fine for evading taxman. Yes, that is all on the front page of the Daily Nation.
Okay, let's move on now to the Business Daily. And on the Business Daily, Ruto Raila talks spur first business growth in 7 months. Uptick in output, sales attributed to political stability. Private sector hiring rises at fastest rate in 2 years. And yesterday you saw Raila Odinga attending the Africa Climate Summit.
Oh, yes.
And listening very keenly, and even at some point even clapping for President William Ruto as he made his remarks.
And it's interesting, I mean, even during the weekend when he was, making his tours during the Western, he had slammed the president for his, climate talks. So,
well, I think it's politics sometimes because you have to maintain the script. Stick to the script sometimes, but then again, once in a while, you're allowed to break protocol. The thing with politics is that you'll never understand what's happening. And when you see such instances like what was happening yesterday, I can tell you there's more to come.
Yes, and even Kenyans on social media are trying to understand that particular handshake between Azimio leader Raila Odinga when he exited the car and shook hands with Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. It
was an interesting thing, and I'm sure people will continue talking about that photo for a while now.
Oh, yes.
The other story on the front page of the Business Daily, betting firms face 2 more gambling taxes in new bill. That's on the bottom strip. On the right-hand side, distressed SMEs need on average 30,000 shillings capital to reopen. And AFDB launches 145.5 billion shilling funding for Africa startups. Those are the stories featured on the front page of the Business Daily today.
Right, and now the Taifa Leo. Taifa Leo today actually has gone off script. I mean, you remember on Monday and Tuesday, it was talking about politics and actually looking at the hand of Azimio and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, Raila Odinga, who might actually take over from him. It's covered that on Monday and Tuesday, but then today it is focusing on matters climate change. And Taifa Leo, asubuhi ya leo, yasema kuwa viongozi wasema Afrika inaathiriwa zaidi licha ya mataifa ya magharibi kuchafua anga. Na kwa ufupi, Taifa Leo sema tunataka haki. Na katika habari kamili utapata katika ukurasa wa pili. Kwa kifupi, Rais William Ruto jana aliongoza viongozi wa mataifa ya Afrika kudai haki kwa kushinikiza bara hili kushirikishwa kikamilifu katika masuala yanayohusu mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Mengi katika hayo katika ukurasa wa pili. Hapo chini, Raila azua msisimko KICC akilakiwa na Gachagua. Kiongozi wa upinzani alizua msisimko kwa kupokelewa kwa heshima na naibu rais katika jumba la KICC alipowasili kuhudhuria kongamano hilo. Bwana Odinga aliwasili katika lango lililotengewa marais na watu mashuhuri kiingia ukumbi wa mkutano na kupokelewa na Bwana Gachagua aliyekuwa akisubiri. Hapo juu, watumishi kutafuna minofu. Wabunge wakoa wale wanaoshikilia nyadhifa kwa zaidi ya miezi 6. Na this story is actually similar to what was now on the back page of a Daily Nation. Taifa Leo actually also goes with the Rubiales story. The kissing Spanish president, football president. Wanasoka Uhispania wanataka Rubiales nje. Ashatoka nje. Rais wa soka akataa wito wa makocha ajiuzulu. Mengi ya hadithi hiyo au taarifa hiyo katika ukurasa wa 20. Hapo kando, shujaa wa Mau Mau waombolezwa. Wakenya waomboleza kifo cha Field Marshal Kirima aliyefariki jana akiwa na miaka 92. Athi kaunti za Kabako, Kampuni. Hayo ndio vidokezo katika Taifa Leo.
Okay. From Taifa Leo, we do have the People Daily, and on the People Daily, it mirrors what's happening with the Standard and the Daily Nation. The big discussion, the big highlight, the big headline: climate leaders speak up for Africa. And this is from the Africa Climate Summit. Africa cannot grow because it is burdened by unfair debt, heads protest. UN boss Guterres challenges top polluters to take full responsibility. And Kenya signs 3 deals on food security as UAE gives $4.5 billion for clean energy in Africa. And there we have a photo of the presidents and heads of government who attended the summit yesterday with President Ruto at the KICC. On the top strip of the Standard, another story making headlines: iScans generated 2.5 billion in 2 days. Central Bank boss Tuge says the money was not checked because M-Pesa moves hundreds of billions daily. That story is on page 3 of the People Daily. In business news, how come sugar millers owe 128 billion shillings? MPs now ask. Legislators also want to know why the 5 state-owned farms owe farmers 1.7 billion. That's the story on page 14 of the People Daily. Well, I think it's time for us now to cross over, to cross the border. And we start off with Tanzania.
All right.
And in Tanzania, we have, which one do you have?
You can see the Citizen here.
Okay.
You also have Mwananchi. You can start with the Citizen. And the Citizen this morning, Tanzania's Grand Food Sustainability Strategy. So the Citizen says the government, together with the key stakeholders in the agricultural space and food supply ecosystem, has listed a raft of measures that, if taken, will make Tanzania Africa's and the world's bread basket. Story on page 4 and 5 lists a number of numbers there, and also a quote, one by the Vice President, that is Dr. Philip Mgango. Tanzania is leveraging digital technologies for planning, monitoring and evaluation, extension services and marketing agricultural businesses. Tanzania is estimated to have 80% arable land. However, only 44% of it is utilized. The bottom strip there, their president is actually in Kenya for the summit. Samia proposes special climate fund for Africa. Page 2, you can read that right there on page 2 and see which particular special fund does Samia talk about. Mwananchi?
On the front page of the Mwananchi, wazee waweka ngumu vuguvugu la elimu katiba mpya. And this has to do with the constitution, civic education in the expected constitution review in Tanzania. That's the big headline on the front page of Mwananchi. Other stories making it to the front page of the Mwananchi: Tanzania inavyoweza kuwa kinara kuzalisha chakula barani Afrika. Another story highlighted there: polisi waachwe wafanye kazi uchaguzi kwa maelekezo ya uchaguzi. Polisi waachwe wafanye kazi kwa maelekezo kwenye chaguzi.
No.
And finally on the top strip of the Mwananchi, sekeseke la mafuta huku bei zikibadilika. Sekeseke la mafuta, sekeseke. Well, that's a new Swahili word I've learned today, sekeseke. So it could be like zogo zogo la mafuta, sekeseke.
Every day?
We learn. Every day we learn.
Every day we learn.
Interesting. I think we had to look at Uganda. And Uganda, they have a very interesting headline today.
Oh yes, and actually, well, 2 sad headlines there. On the front page of the Daily Monitor this morning. Arsenal fan killed after Man United loss. So what reportedly began as a taunt between Ugandan fans over results of the Sunday game between rival top flight English Premiership sides, more than 10,000 kilometers away, ended in the stabbing death of a 29-year-old man in western Uganda. That story is on page 6. And it's always interesting how much EPL is in Uganda, how the fans always react.
Even in Kenya here, I remember a few years back some needless deaths happening, people committing suicide and some such like things. So yes, it is sad, but it's not the first time, and passions around football can actually get really inflamed, and people are usually charged up. It's it's rare. Kati ya Man U na Arsenal ni gali kali. That rivalry is huge even in Kenya.
I remember there's a time, was it last year, late last year? I think it was Man United fans in Uganda who were arrested. They were rioting, along the streets, and they had to be arrested. So probably Uganda, Kenya. Well, I'm not sure how big it is in Tanzania. Kaka.
Interestingly, in Tanzania, they prefer watching their own football. Yanga, between Yanga and Simba. So yes, deal, but in Uganda and Kenya, I think Arsenal versus Manchester United is big.
All right. On the top strip, finally, another sad story here. Sliced remains of woman recovered in a septic tank. That is on page, I believe that's on page, is it 2 or 3? Can't see for well. But yes, that's on Uganda. Now to a caricature this morning on page 12 of the Standard this morning. Corporate agenda on climate change is a briefcase that has been held there by a number of gentlemen, probably covered in different animal faces. Congratulations, Your Excellency, wonderful speech. One of them says, we support you and we are fully behind you all the way. Another says, we are with you, you are one of us. Another one says, has to do with matters climate financing and how even it actually mirrors what is on the front page of the Standard, Africa's loud voice, and the loud voice and actually one voice. When you take a look at these keynote speakers, and actually most of them from Africa, they were speaking in one tone, and it actually resonates.
My analysis is different. It's my interpretation of that cartoon and the one on the Daily Nation, because they are one and the same. These cartoonists have repeatedly used this kind of caricatures to try and portray loads of corruption.
Oh yes, true.
Yes. So yes. Even as we talk about funding for and reparations for Africa by those who are polluting the environment, you can see lots of corruption getting excited, and it's the same presentation, the same portrayal on page 12 of the Standard in the cartoon, and the same on page 17 of the Daily Nation, that the lords of corruption are ready and readying themselves for these monies that we are being told will be coming our way. And it's very sad that even when discussions are taking place at such kind of level, that we know if at all there'll be any money coming to Africa, or to Kenya for that matter, that a lot of it will go into the hands of these corrupt people.
I mean, if you actually sum up what is on the Standard this morning, if you actually have the Standard this morning, you can do simple maths. On the front page of it, they give you the numbers there of the summit pledges, the number of, rather the money to be streamed in. And well, you can take a look at all that and actually sum up just to understand how big of a deal this is. Wow. I think today is that day that we say we are going with both papers.
Yes, I think they've managed to capture the fears of Kenya, because we know even as we struggle to really understand what this climate change and climate action discussion is all about in Kenya, at least we know one thing: there's money coming.
There's money coming.
Yes, but when it comes, where is it going?
You do have People Daily there. I'm seeing you.
Yes, I'm looking for the one on the People Daily. I don't know. Yes, I found it on the People Daily, and this one is on page 10 of the People Daily. This one has to do with matters health. Patient there. Oh, yes, I think it has to do with a student a candidate for national exam sitting the exam in hospital. Yes, this discussion was there yesterday.
Oh, yes.
And I think they said there will no longer be
KCP and KCSE.
KCP or KCSE being taken in hospitals, in a hospital environment.
But okay, I'm pretty sure this is actually a conversation that definitely will go on, and hopefully one day we'll actually have it on this round table to get the sentiments.
Time to keep national exams out of hospital wards.
Even from the parents, because many years, for a number of years, you'd always see students in hospitals.
Yeah. So yes, that is as far as the caricatures are concerned. After the break, we'll be hosting the Honorable Titus Lote, MP Kachiliba, Alex Muavi, Governor's expert, and Kausar Ahmed, environmental activist at Ecovista, to discuss the big headlines today. And of course, the big discussion has to do with the climate action and climate change and the discussions happening, even as the Africa Climate Summit comes to an end at the KICC. Remember our question today, we're asking, are you now better aware about the climate change and climate action discussions? Yes?
Oh, yes.
And are you now more aware of Africa's climate action agenda?
Right.
And you can share your views with us at TV47 News on X and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe. Don't go too far. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. And we're just about to get down to this discussion. This whole week we've been talking about the Africa Climate Summit. So discussions around climate action, climate change, global warming. And the summit comes to an end today at the KICC. Remember, it is Africa Climate Week, which extends up until Friday, but the summit ends today. Very interesting discussions going on. Matters to do with money. The amount of money that's going to come to Kenya and Africa as a whole. But where is this money going to? And we were looking at the cartoons on both the Daily Nation and the Standard just before the break. And that appears to be the main question. This morning we're privileged to have in studio the Honorable Titus Lote, MP Kachiliba. Good to have you in studio. Karibu sana. Good morning. And a familiar face on this panel, Alex Moore, the governance expert. It's good to have you in studio.
Always a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to do that.
Asante sana.
Yeah. Good morning, viewers.
Yes, for the first time this week we've had the opportunity to discuss something out of the ordinary. We've always spoken and talked about politics over and over. This time around we're talking about politics still, but a different kind of politics. Politics of the environment, and probably on a different scale. Issues to do with the continental discussions about reparations to Africa by those who pollute the environment the most, and how much of that will go where. But the biggest question has always been the issue of corruption. Because even before we come to these other discussions, just a look at the cartoons on both the Daily Nation and the Standard, you would think they were drawn by the same person, because they talk about, they use those caricatures of animals, crocodiles, pigs, and fat cats, waiting and queuing for the money that should be coming our way. So the question is this another scandal in the making? We saw what happened with the COVID, the global pandemic, and after that there was so much talk about how money came to Africa, how money came to Kenya, and how it was misused or looted. Are we looking at another scandal? Let's start with you, Alex.
It's a very interesting thing that when we discuss about serious matters like climate change,
Okay.
it boils down to the
And unfortunately, I'm informed that your microphone has an issue, so let's give Honorable Titus Lote an opportunity to kick-start this conversation. We'll come back to you shortly. So, Honorable Lote, it is sad that we have to start this discussion this way, but that is the biggest problem we have in Kenya especially, that whenever we expect or we look forward to any kind of funding coming our way, our biggest fear as a country is that that money will not get to the right people, that somehow the fat cats and corruption lords will get away with it.
Well, thank you. And it's a very sad way of starting a discussion to talk about corruption when a very big conference has been held and the benefits of the conference is starting to be seen. Because if you look at the kind of pledges that we've gotten from this conference, where the polluters, the net polluters of our environments are pledged to support countries in Africa, I think we need to be optimistic as a country. I know we've gone through an history where a lot of our resources have been looted. A lot of our resources have been mismanaged by those that are in power. But I think when it reaches to levels where we talk about our environment, it would be important that we become a little bit optimistic, not pour cold water into such big initiatives. I think as a country we've gone through the beating with time, that everything has been drained down by corruption to levels where we even now start to fear to receive this funding from the net polluters of our environment. I will say, well, we've gone through this history, but I think let us at this particular point be optimistic that this resources that is coming to us in form of carbon credits are also going to help this country. Mm-hmm. So I am a person that will not say, let us continue to suffer the injustice of last years. Mm-hmm. because of the history. Let us try to forge forward. And forging forward has actually been seen. We never had an environmental meet like we've had now in Africa, the African Climate Summit. We've never had it before. And now because we've had it, we are moving positively forward. So as a country, I will only urge the people that are managing our resources not to allow this country to go to what the cartoonists are trying to say, but to try to give positive vibes. And personally in the studio today, I will give positive vibes that our resources are going to transform our environments. Our resources are not going to go through the corruption cartels.
Yet this kind of skepticism is definitely justified. We've seen, and this is time and again, not just in one instance, that the way finances and resources are managed right now, they always leaves questions to be asked. The issue could be more to do with the lack of structures, especially on these matters of climate action and how the funds trickle down to the communities level. Your people in Kacheliba may not even be aware of the kind of discussion going on in Nairobi. They just know, they may hear that there is money, but for this money to get to them, there are so many questions and structures required to be set up. Definitely at this point, even those people who understand this issue, those questions are around the structures that we have currently. Definitely those questions need answers.
Very true. I think the reason why the cartoonists, and it's very sad that cartoonists are depicting our leaders in such a manner, because you can see all those animals apart from one person, and that one person is, I believe, was the cartoon that depicts the president. Basically, the cartoonist is trying to say that the president and his Hulk are actually the ones that are going to mismanage our resources. Very sad from what I'm seeing.
Not necessarily, because
it looks like...
my interpretation would be that the president's intentions are clear, and honorable. But there are people who are seeking to take advantage of those intentions. Yes. That is my interpretation.
And I think let me just come back to that. If that is what is depicted there, the president has been very categorical in his speeches. Of late, you've actually seen the president talking very tough about corruption. And already in one year in his office, we've seen head rolls. We have seen people, around 12 people who had relieved of their duties in NHIF. We've seen a PS leaving his duty because of corruption. And we've seen the president giving us what is something written in the book of Ezra 7:26 to say there are only 3 things that you need to do in this country. And that is in the Bible. It says you either be exiled, you either go to jail, or you die. Basically meaning the president has a goodwill. And let us operate on that goodwill. Let us not pour cold water in what the president is trying to do. The people of Kacheliba and the people of the rural Kenya and everywhere else are becoming more informed because of the social media and the way things are flying. I think this conference is a conference that many people are aware of, and the fact that 20 presidents of Africa are here basically telling you that it's a high level conference and many people know what is happening. The only thing that I'll still call to say is that let us put our structures in place. And if you look at the act that was passed last week, the Climate Change Act, that Climate Change Act has a robust mechanism of ensuring that the resources that will come into this country in form of carbon credits are going to be taken care of. The president will not have gone to this high-level conference without that act signed. And that is a commitment to say, well, the conference might bring some resources, and of course we are seeing the conference bringing resources. But then let us not go into this conference before we get the structures in place, and the structures are now in place. And for me, I'll say, let us not continue pouring water on our own structures, on our own system, on our own government. If we continue doing that, we become pessimistic and we will actually run our government down. So I will encourage in studios like this and in forums where people meet, let us be positive for once, and probably that way this country can move out of our problems.
Allow me also to introduce to the panel Kosa Ahmed, environmental activist at Ecovista. Karibu sana. We'll come to you shortly. Alex, I'm sure your mic is fixed now. But good intentions are welcome. but the reality that of our situation remains the same.
Yeah, when you go to a doctor and you have a problem, you have to get a full diagnosis. If the doctor by any chance covered up with the hope that create positive vibes, you'll never get healed. You'll die. There's a chance that if you open up yourself, we know we've been corrupt. We know today that we are, as a government, we are very wasteful. So it's very easy to assume that whatever comes, we will also waste it. And I started by you taking me towards this misuse of funds and talk about corruption. And I started by saying that we have a serious issue. And there are two thoughts of the world in terms of climate change. And what is climate change? It's basically, very simply, change of temperatures and change of weather patterns around the world. And people have postulated the reason why. We have the Trump group that postulates that it's because of the orbit of the Earth around the sun. And these things will continue changing over a period of time. And they give you examples of the Ice Age. They give you examples of the Noah floods that the Christians and the Muslims agree that they were there. And they were not caused by anyone. And there's either the group that address that is the activity of human beings. Number one, what you're talking about today is about the carbon emissions and greenhouses effects from the industrialized nations, and others will talk about deforestation. And then maybe is a mixture of all those things. So it's a serious issue because we've seen areas that were net producers falling back, not to be able to produce anything. We've seen the desertification in certain areas. So instead of discussing those issues and the solution that we can get out of those, we are focusing on borrowing and having, begging bowls as nations, as Africa, from the rest of the world. And I think that's a wrong direction. And I'm reminded of a definition for politics by a guy called Ernest Benn, who says, politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it whether it exists or not, diagonizing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. we boil down such a big issue into money and how it can be used.
Yes.
Money and how it can be corruptly used. And we take such an opportunity to talk about our borrowing, the debt, the interest rates that others are charging us. You'll be charged interest rate depending on your ability to pay. Even local banks have what they call the risk factor. We are risky fellas to borrow from the rest of the world because we misuse the funds that we borrow. Honorable Kacheribe from Kacheribe and anybody else who wants to talk about positive about the current government, it's nice. We supported it at the initial stage, but we expect them to do some work.
Okay.
If immigration department can stay without a printing machine for 4 years, it tells you how corrupt we are. We don't need to read newspapers or to see cartoons of monkeys and pigs. We are pigs. In terms of
it is a real problem.
It's a real problem.
Kosa Ahmed, you're an environmentalist activist, and of course, a lot of this discussion about climate change is very hazy to a lot of Kenyans. But with the mention of money, it becomes a huge incentive for people to get involved, meaning there will be some financial benefit for people in Kenya. The fact that people do not know exactly how this money will be accessed by communities is a huge issue. We've never had this discussion. Yes, the president signed the amendments to the Climate Act last week, but how much of that discussion was even canvassed within the public? The amendments that he is signed into law. Communities still do not know what is happening in Nairobi right now.
I agree with you because some of these things are the communities don't know. I am from Garissa. In a place like that, I understand that the president has the goodwill to make this issue a national issue and to help the community. But first of all, before we do the bills and before we do things in Nairobi, people especially in these communities that do not understand what's happening. from where I come from, people still believe that God is cursing them. And that's why things are not, that's why we don't have rain, that's why we have floods. And so the money is good. Right now, everyone is talking about, the carbon market and climate financing. They don't understand how the communities are going to access that because we, the elite, do not understand it ourselves. So how do we use these terms and take it to the community and make them understand that this is money that they can access? Also, how do we make them understand, first of all, where are we getting the land to plant these trees? We are asking for climate justice, but then climate justice will not come if we do not consult these communities. We have signed a bill about mitigation when we should have focused on adaptation. The community is already struggling. A tree that will maybe in the future do something does not help someone who is hungry right now. The communities are losing their source of livelihoods. They are losing their cattle, they are losing their camels in places like Garissa, Mandera, Wajir, and the rest of the country. So when we talk about the money that we do not have access to right now in areas like Nakuru and these places that have the forests, the communities have not accessed that yet. So
Yet there's been money coming in already.
yet there has been money coming in. The little that has been done at a community level, we appreciate that. But there's need to do absolute more. Because you cannot convince someone that is hungry right now that they will be able to access this money in the future. That does not make sense. Even to an environmental activist like me, I have an environmental background, I understand the terms, but still I find it very hard to believe that that is the bill that was signed. Yes.
Okay, and we saw your colleague, Peter Salasya, and this video that he made was really much talked about across the country in social media spaces. This is a representative from Mumias, and he had his understanding of the whole issue, the kind of discussions and debates going on at the KICC, is what people are criticizing. He may be right, he may be wrong. But if Kenyans question their representatives' understanding of the issues being conversed at the summit that's ending today, then who will speak for Kenyans? Are the people of Kacheliba confident, for example, that when it comes to issues of climate change, our representative will tell us what is happening?
Correct. One, I want to agree to what was going on through the social media about Member of Parliament for Mumias East, Bwana Peter Salasya, in terms of his understanding of the climate change. But I think we need to look at the political tactics of every politician. You remember Peter Salasya, when we were being sworn in, he kept on saying, Madam Speaker, when actually it wasn't a madam, it was Mr. Speaker. And he kept on doing this, not to dismay of many, because he knew what he was doing. He's actually trying to create a name by being controversial. We've seen him going to social media and saying he's looking for a woman, and so they need to come and apply and give conditions. So for him to become controversial, you also saw him on the sugar bill before the president last week went to Western Kenya. So let us not look at Peter Salasya as an individual that is lost. Probably that is his political tactic of being exposed to everybody. Now he's a celebrity. People talk about him, though in the negative way, but he's known. Now people know Peter Salasya more than today we are discussing him here. So one, that is the first thing that I want us to discuss. Let's just discuss Peter Salasya as a person that is trying to build his politics around that. But I think the people of Kacheliba and the people of many places in this constituencies needs to know that their leaders understand this. And the reason why we are called lawmakers, we are the one that makes this law. When we were in Bunge last week trying to discuss this aspect of the climate change bill, we discussed this from the point of knowledge. I sit in that committee, and we were able to dispense this thing in a manner that is Correct. I'll ask you to give it to my colleague. I come back because I need.
Okay. Alex, the issue of our leadership, the fact that many representatives of far-flung areas that will be most affected by this discussion is what is in question right now. The fact that they've come with this bill. Many people at the community level are not involved, or if at all they were involved, their participation and to what level we still cannot estimate. What exactly, or where will we turn to if we are not sure that our leadership understands this? But before that, allow me to take us to a break. Yes, it's already 7 a.m. Let's take a break. We'll be back. You're watching Morning Cafe. The three-day African Climate Summit comes to an end at the KICC today. The event has seen at least 19 heads of states and governments attend. Now, this week's meeting is expected to come up with a Nairobi Declaration, a document that will highlight Africa's united voice in the global climate arena and which could dominate the African agenda in New York during the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly this month, and later in Dubai during the annual United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP28. And so today we ask you, are you now more aware of issues around Africa's climate action? Even as we come to the end of the Africa Climate Summit, are you now more aware of issues around Africa's climate action? You can share your views or feedback to that question at TV47 News on X and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Yes, and just before the break, We had our guests talking about this. Honorable Lote, MP Kachiliba, we were talking about the level of understanding of especially members of parliament, the people's representatives on matters climate change. If at all the understanding at that level is wanting, what about the community? Who will bridge the gap, or who will connect between the community and the discussions at the national level?
Well, thank you. Just to come back to the discussions I had before. Yesterday, I was a panelist in one of the side meetings in the African Climate Summit at the KICC. And one of the things that came out clear, and it continues to come out clear, is that the understanding of climate change is something that is new. A lot of people do not understand climate change. Surprisingly, even the experts yesterday were arguing on points that they had different understanding of the same thing. And basically that tells you it's not only the members of parliament, but also climate change experts do not have a common stand. If we talk about carbon credit, for example, nobody will tell you there is a common understanding of what carbon credit is all about and how it's going to be priced and the carbon market. Nobody understands it. So I'll say it is very sad that all of us, including experts, are actually coming to a new field. It is new because we've never took time to understand it. Since the Kyoto Protocol of 2005, it took us 16 years, close to 11 years, not 16, for us to come with our first act, the Climate Change Act of 2016.
Yes.
It basically tells you it is something that we are not keen we were not keen to understand. And it has taken from 2016 up to last month is when we are doing an amendment to that act, 2016 to 2023. What are we saying? We are saying we have never taken climate change a very serious matter. We are only coming to the effects of climate change and then realizes that when people sat in Kyoto in 2005 and say that now we will start charging people who are emitting carbon dioxide and polluting our environment, people thought it was a joke. But then we find ourselves in this hut, and there is a fire point, and there is no exit, and the fire point continue to eject carbon into the house. And very soon, without a door, we will all collapse inside this house. And that is the reason why Kyoto Protocol was called. And then there was a Paris Agreement that followed 2 years after, where it said that we now need to mobilize resources, probably $100 million to be able to start giving to institutions that are sinking this carbon. Again, nobody understood about that. That was many years ago, 2007. Now, this is the time we are talking about carbon credits. We are now starting to say as a country, oh, we are waking up and we are realizing that we can be able to sink carbon and then get resources out of it. How many years from 2007, from the Paris Agreement to now? Many years. And basically, nobody has taken issues to deal with climate change seriously. So the understanding of climate change by legislatures is something that I will not say legislatures understand. Yesterday I gave an example. When I was sitting with many legislatures who are not sitting in a committee, and I'm very privileged to have sat and sitting in a committee to deal with the environment. And so I have sat and looked at every bill and every law, our constitution, anything that is about climate. So me, I can adequately understand and tell people. Members of parliament were asking me, how do we trade on carbon credit? They were asking me that simple question, how do you do? And I was trying to take them from one step to another one. And I want to appreciate the media. The media for the last 3 days, every media house has been trying to teach people what this is. Why is the media teaching? The media is teaching because the media is realizing also that even within its own self, people don't understand this thing called carbon credit. And so carbon credit and carbon market and environment and global warming, people are now coming to understand it. So I will not blame the members of parliament for not understanding it. They are members of public as well. Probably there are things that they think they deem is more important than the issues to deal with climate. And so very few do understand, those that have got interest in it. For us to pass a bill, for example, the climate change bill which was passed, as long as we have got the majority saying hi, it goes through, whether we are 390, whether we are 400, or whether we are 50.
Or whether you understand exactly what's in it or not.
Exactly.
Alex Mwadhi, listening to the leaders speaking at the Africa Climate Summit, this is definitely going to be a game changer. Yet the understanding of the basics that we're talking about is lacking, not just at the community level, but even at the leadership level. Definitely, how will we turn this around? There appears to be a gap.
I must thank the Member of Parliament with us this morning, because I think he had started with a theory that people understand. And I'm so happy that he's owned up that there's little understanding about this. And that's why I started by telling you that the two schools of thoughts that globally are there, that there's still contentions about what is causing climate change. With the Trump group, I use Trump because he's the one who really moves this, but there are scientists, professors in various universities, especially in the US, who pretend to do a lot of research to be able to come up with conclusion, saying that this has nothing to do with the conversation you're having. So you tell me the carbon that you're burning in the years when the dinosaurs were being finished in the Ice Age. You tell me when the Noah flood came, show me the trees that you had cut down for that to happen. But having said that, climate change is a real issue. The Trumpetians, let me call them that for purpose of argument, are saying that the oceans are rising up by a quarter of an inch every 50 years. The scientists are saying no. Is every year. To an extent that they're saying that in the next 50 years, the seas will have come up by about 6 to 7 inches higher, meaning that there will be more water coming into the land because the glaciers are melting and what have you. Now, if at the global level there is that lack of understanding, for us to sit down and pretend that we understand is folly. And it's nice to admit that even the passing of that bill is more based on a push that needed to be done. So that by the time you have this summit coming to Nairobi, you have a bill that supposes that this country is already taking action towards a climate change. And for that to happen, then if you go back to the begging bowl, then money will be trickling into the bowl because you acting on it. And that, for me, is a serious issue. And when this MP for Mumias was saying what he was saying about lack of understanding, he was just being bluntly honest. And there are very few people in this world who are that honest, that I don't know this thing. And I wasn't elected to go and deal with climate change. Of course, he forgets that he was elected so that he can go and learn and understand. The gentleman sitting next to me did not learn what he knows in school. You've heard him say he studied all the laws, he studied all the constitution, he studied all the documentation. What do we do ourselves? When we have a summit like this, we keep go back so that we can be able to understand what is this that is coming, so that if you have to have a conversation with someone, then you don't come it from a Salacia point of view, where you pretend that these things don't bother. But the bigger issue is this. While we talk about money, and we talk about corruption, and we talk about debt, we forget the real issues that we ourselves can do. Because I told you, in the conversation that is there, and one would assume that each one has his own effect. Volcanic eruptions, the orbit of the Earth around the sun causes difference. There are 5, 6, 7 of the key areas that researchers have said could be causing the so-called climate change. But among that, this has to do with deforestation. Because even when you give credit carbons, which means that you're dealing with the carbon emissions and all that, as one of the reasons for climate change, the trees are supposed that they can be able to absorb carbon. So what you need to is to increase the forest cover. Fred, do you know that since then year, I think it's 2010, so 2000 and, the year 2000, we have deforested 129 million hectares of land. Is the land equivalent to South Africa around the globe? Meaning that you have 129 million hectares of land that cannot help you absorb the carbon. To an extent, even when you talk about the carbon credit in Kenya, you're joking. Because the forest cover for Kenya is only 6%. And it's been 6% for the last 20, 30 years. Meaning that even as you ask for money, you're not looking at the real issue. Do I want to increase this cover to be like Tanzania at 55%. So that if money was to come in because of the forestry and carbon, Tanzania will get how much times? Almost 10 times the amount of money that Kenya will get.
Yes.
And that's the real issue that these leaders need to understand and be able to deal with it so that we can start moving forward.
Yet, on this issue of tree planting, granted to the president, he's already started a campaign to plant 15 billion trees. But he's also come under criticism that despite him assuming this activist position, this crusader position in matters climate action, even at a global stage, that back home he's just lifted a ban on logging. And the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, criticized him for not being genuine in his discussions in matters climate action.
That has been an issue, even within the elite circles of the environmentalists, the climate activists. But then again, I think it's a problem to want to plant 15 billion trees, which is a very noble cause. We might not get there, but Kenyans are going to try. But the lift on burning, on logging has been a problem, because now in areas that it's so hard to see the difference, who is cutting the mature trees and who is just cutting trees for the sake of cutting. And like areas of northeastern people do, their main source of livelihood is charcoal burning. And so you've literally given these people the right to cut trees. And they don't understand the difference between the mature trees and the normal trees. So to them, if you ask them, they're doing what the president has asked them to do. It's okay for them to do that. No one has any permits. In very remote areas, it's hard to try and see who is doing the right thing and who is doing the wrong thing. Again, these matters of tree planting, at this point we are past planting trees. We need to make sure these trees grow so that they do what they're supposed to do. And I'd always say this: if you plant a tree now, me as someone who is from Garissa and is struggling with drought and every side effect of climate change, it is not doing what it's supposed to do for me. We talked about adaptation. There's when people went to COP27. At this point, we feel like people are going to COP just for tourism and to go enjoy the taxpayer money.
Including the summit in Nairobi.
Including the summit in Nairobi, because a lot of the youths who applied to go to the summit were not given the ability to attend, because they were accredited and then they get there and they are told that their badges were not printed. I understand that. First of all, youths in Kenya, I feel like there is no meaningful participation in everything that happens, because even if we were allowed to attend the summit, what can we possibly do? What can our voices change? I traveled all the way from Garissa to attend these. Yes, I have attended. I have seen what the president and the rest of the leaders are doing. But how does that translate to my community? The people who are attending, you know what would have been better if this summit was held in Garissa or in Turkana, because then all these people who are coming to talk about the carbon credits would see there are people who are actually dying, and it's just not about the money. In COP27, we talked about loss and damage. The money that was supposed to be paid to these communities, some of this money is getting into the country. But how is that translating to the communities that are being affected? And the president has the good political will, but what happens to the rest of the leaders? When you tell me our leaders do not understand, and I agree with him, that they're just normal humans like us, but you are in a place to lead people. I expect you to go and learn. I expect you to hire some of these activists so that they take you through what is happening. You cannot tell me you were not elected to talk about matters climate change. In areas like the ASAL counties, that is Garissa, Mandera, Turkana, Wajir, these are places that hundreds and millions of animals are dying. Just 2021, the 2021-2022 drought that happened, over 2.4 million animals died, and that is the whole backbone of the economy in this area. And so when you tell me as a leader you don't understand, I have a problem with that, and I expect you to go learn, and I expect you, when these bills are being passed or when these things are being implemented, I expect you to stand for your people. And just attending a summit and just being there will not do.
Okay. Should in the conversation therefore be the learning gap, the place of education in all this, the fact that in all these discussions we are not talking about mainstreaming climate change in our education curriculum, then where will the understanding come from if at all we leave it to the leaders and the communities to learn by themselves?
No, well, I think, let me first of all, as I answer that, try to put some things into perspective. That the bill was rushed so that the president can sign the bill, the climate